Okay, so today's session is on how to improvise while teaching. And this is one of my favorite areas of teaching because I feel that being able to improvise something is one of those things that some of us are more comfortable doing than others. Depending on our personalities, depending on our past experiences. Um, I think also the way that our brain works is one of those things that some of us will be more comfortable than others. Now, having said that, it is also something that we can work towards if we tend to be people that stick to the plan and have difficulties getting out of the box last minute. That's okay. There are tools and ways that we can work toward being able to do the things that maybe don't come so naturally to us. So I'm just going to pull up my notes here quickly. So now, throughout teaching, I have discovered, well, actually, to be honest, every time that I've gone to teach a class, I feel that something happens before class that when I'm there, I'm not 100% myself. And I've been teaching for many years, more than 10 years, and many classes a week. And for some reason, when I get to the studio, I feel that I'm not 100% there myself to teach a class. And this is due to a few factors. So the first thing is a little bit of nervousness. So being nervous, I think many of us have that. I still think that even after many years of teaching, that never really went away for me, that idea of standing in front of people and talking. But there are ways that we can work on figuring that out and working through that and not really having it shown so others don't really know what's happening really. So the class goes smoothly and then your presence seemed like it was a good presence for everyone else, but for you, you had to work hard to get there. So I'm one of those people that I work hard to not let my nerves get to me. And also, I love biking and I love commuting to work. So being tired is is another thing that I remember when I right now I'm better at that, and also teaching online is differently, um but when I used to teach a lot in the studios and I would back to the studios and then I would have to teach a restorative class, but then my heart was going, twice as fast, then it's like, okay, how can I quickly calm down? So I teach this class, but I don't seem like I'm rushing because I'm supposed to create this space where everyone else has a space to come down and to relax and to notice the breath and to sink in, and you don't want the instructor to be the opposite of that. So many times teaching, whether it was a gentle class, restorative yin class, I felt totally the opposite before getting there. I'm blaming that on also overly exercising before getting there. Um, so, but again, there is ways. The more you do it, the more you kind of get used to it. Maybe you then go a little bit earlier, so you have some time before teaching that allows you to change your clothes, to have some tea, to kind of like sinking into that headspace in order to be able to be present and be there and at the same how do you call, there is that word, frequency, at the same frequency that you want for your students to kind of like tune in with you as well. So I'm gonna go through a few other things that I've noticed through my time of teaching, and just to let you know, I don't, because I'm using my computer, not my phone. I cannot see comments. Um, Actually, I do. I can see comments. So if anyone has a question or a comment, feel free to post that there. Um, and so a few other things that happen. So let's say you have a class that you are preparing, and you have new to teaching. You are new to teaching, and you have this sequence that you created for your class. And maybe you're not as comfortable getting out of your box before going into teach. There are a few things that is going to make you change that. So it's going to push you to improvise and do something else, even though you already attach yourself to this amazing, beautiful sequence that you created. We also have some crazy wind going on. So if you hear some extra sounds, that's the wind blowing in the back. So, first of all, lots of people in class, some poses, let's say when you have two mats really close to each other, there is going to be challenges when it comes to teaching, let's say, two knee twist. So, you know that pose when you lie down and on your back, and then you take both knees to one side for a few breaths, and then both knees to the other side. Two knee twist pose, because the arms are open and the limbs go outside of the edges of the mat, is going to be one of those poses where if you were to have all the students opening the arms, they're basically going to touch the other person's yoga mat. And sometimes that's fine, but I usually tend to avoid that, and I tend to do a seated twist instead, or something that does not require that the limbs go outside of the edges of the mat. Things like um, when the leg also has to come out of the edge of the mat, or anything like that. So thinking on the spot, and to be honest, this gets easier with teaching. The more you teach, the quicker you are able to sink into that moment and be like, okay, I want to teach recline two knee twist, but I can't. What else can I do? Again, as I mentioned before, you can do marichi or any other seated twist that require the students to be seated, and then their limbs are not going to come out of the mat. Another thing that I can think of is, let's say, reclined hand to big toe pose. When we are lying down, take the hand and hold onto the foot with the two-piece fingers, holding onto the big toe, or with a strap. And then the body's lying down and the leg starts to go out to the side in an external rotation. That is another position in which the student is going to go outside of the yoga mat. So scooching everyone to the left edge of the mat, so then the leg can still go out to the side and the leg still stays almost within the space of the yoga mat. And being able to archive poses in your brain, so you know that, okay, I cannot do reclined two knee twist, but I can do another twist. So being able to categorize twists, standing poses, warriors, arm balances, core poses, back bends, back strengtheners, being able to categorize those poses in your brain is really helpful, because in the last minute, you will be able to switch that pose that is in your sequence, because you don't have enough space in the class. You can also avoid teaching that pose. You can elongate what you have, or add something else that is similar to the previous pose. And this is why in our teacher training, when it comes to uh, the way the asanas are explained in the manual, or the order of the poses in the manual, they are categorized most of the time the best that we could between standing poses, sand salutation poses, recline poses, twists, core, things like that. So have a piece of paper, write down the categories of the poses, so then last minute you can know which pose you can replace for which one if the space is not allowing to do so. Something that happened to me once I felt that I didn't know what to do was that I had a student that had a very that had smelly feet, and it was very strong, and it was a hatha class, and I think it was summer, and and just right away you enter the room and smell like feet, and I was like, oh, and there was a specific section in the class where the student was that the smell intensified. So I was like, okay, I'm obviously not gonna say anything about this, but students are probably gonna notice, and notice where the smell is coming from and not be close to the person. It wasn't a super busy class. It was, people had comfortable amounts between their yoga mats. But I decided that I wasn't going to teach anything that was related to prone poses. Prone poses meaning poses that are lying down on your front. So like locust or cobra or upward facing dog, because then that means that the person behind would basically be in front of the feet that were very smelly. So I had to rearrange this class just to, in my mind, to help this person behind the person that had smelly feet. And vinyasas sometimes, most of my classes anyways, most of my hatha classes, vinyasas are optional. So vinyasas were for sure optional in that class. No cobras, no locust, and upward dogs were optional because they belong to vinyasa. So that was something that helped me, or anything that maybe like warrior threes also, in which the feet go to one direction. So I right away thought of changing my class for a class in which the feet will stay grounded on the mat or underneath the person, so standing poses, and then the head will be off the ground, like warrior two, let's say. So the head won't be on the floor with the other foot in front. Or poses like seated poses, again, where the feet were really close to the body, where the head wasn't close to the ground. So anything that basically avoid having the head close to the ground and in front of the mat. And that requires a little bit more of changing around, but again, is something that you can choose to do or you can choose to let it go. To me, I felt that I had the experience at the time to deal with it, but if it's something that freaks you out, or you think, no, this requires too much changes, or you don't know what to do, then keep it as it is. I think some of these situations are more obvious than others, like not having enough space in the mat in the class. Obviously, people won't be able to move as much as they would like to. But when it comes to a preference, like avoiding students to have too many smells around them, then that's a choice, and that's something that I thought, maybe I would like that to have happened to me if I were taking the class. So I'm gonna try to provide that to others. Also, because I tend to teach, or I used to teach a lot in downtown, the city, downtown Vancouver, where I was living for many years, and also in Toronto, there was a lot of construction noise. So I always forgot this every time I was gonna go to teach. I was like, oh, right, there's construction. So I felt that when there's a lot of construction, I had to maybe put different music or music that had more instruments, or maybe I had to talk more. And again, talking more is one of the things that you may slowly get more used to doing as well, as you continue to practice your teaching. But changing music or adding music or turning the volume up slightly is a nice way to maybe try to keep the nicer sounds inside the room and not so much the construction. Or if you teach at a gym or a yoga studio that has spinning also next door, sometimes the other music can overpower the music inside the yoga studio. So last minute changes, like having music that maybe would have more instruments in your playlist, or being ready and okay by turning the music up just a little bit more. And you can always tell people, be like, there is construction noise, there is the spinning class going on next door. So in order for me to help that, I am going to turn the music up a little bit just to try to create that yoga or whole health space in the room that I want to held for the class. And sometimes explaining what it is also gonna let people know that you're trying to do something unusual for everyone in the space. You can also use it as part of the practice and be like, okay, today I was gonna talk about ahimsa. There is construction going on outside. How can I connect ahimsa to construction? Maybe the negative thoughts that come with, oh, that construction noise is bothering my practice, in a way that is affecting our practice in a negative way. So we can choose to be like, there is construction noise going on outside, and I'm just gonna work into adding that noise into my practice. And no matter what happens, that noise is not going to affect my practice. So I'm going to continue being kind to myself. So you can also incorporate whatever theme you have into whatever is going on outside of you that you think might make the environment a little more uncomfortable. I have a lot of notes that I want to get through, and I only have 10 minutes left. So we have someone with a cold or a cough, especially in Shavasana. I've had people pre-pandemic, when we were more comfortable having people with a cold coming into class, coughing the whole time. And throughout a yin class, that was pretty annoying. So going to that person, offering some props, some extra props to lift their head up higher than their heart, and or going to them and be like, is everything okay? Or also you can avoid going to that person and then talking a little bit more throughout the class, having more things to say about whatever it is that you're doing, because already the silence is being affected by the person coughing. So you can always add more words, more speaking to it. You may also say, if you're not feeling 100%, feel free to do whatever you need to do. If you need to change the posture, if you need to leave the room, if you need to go get some liquid, come back, that is totally fine. So you can open it up the space for everyone else to do whatever they need to do. Students that come in the class late or leave early during Shavasana, if they leave early, they probably will let you know, and they will go close the door and leave quietly. But always, if they arrive late, sometimes it's very easy to drop our performance as a teacher. Let's say that you're explaining something, someone arrives, and it's just you're there for the students, you're not there for yourself. So whoever missed information, and you're there for the students that were there, that were there on time. So continuing with what you're doing is also a really good way to practicing not being affected by everything that is happening around you. Sometimes I used to read the news before going to class, and that wasn't a good idea. I would go to class depressed or thinking about the bad things that were happening in the world around me. So that was something that I slowly, consciously changed and told myself I wasn't gonna read the news. And Sue says the poor person behind the smelly feet. Yeah, yeah, I know. So the the intention of what you do before you go teach a class is very important. And to be honest, having a meditation practice is so important because it helps to be more in tune with your physical and mental being, that you become more selective of when the activities happen throughout the day. Maybe the news reading doesn't happen that day for you. Maybe you read the news earlier or later. And because you know that you're going to go teach and that you need to keep that mind and that headspace for yourself and to be able to really not feel like you have to fake it when you get to the room and teach from a place of depression. But again, if you're really good at adding your life into your teaching, I'm not. I'm terrible at talking about myself when I teach, but some people are so beautiful when they are so open and they talk about their emotions in a way that is so empowering for everyone else. So if you have that skill and that power, use it, because a lot of people are going to connect with that. And there is going to be also students making sounds in class. Sometimes they're making sounds to release, like, and I encourage that many times. I said, just take a deep exhale here in order to release. And but again, that might affect your state of mind. If you notice that maybe other people are also being affected by this student, um, you know, making sounds. So again, maybe talking more that time. So I would suggest that you get comfortable writing about the poses and get comfortable journaling about the poses and how they make you feel, because these, and you can read these over and over, because, and that helped me too, because once you go to teach, you have things to say about the asana. I personally like to when I feel that other students are distracted by other students in the class, whether it's someone releasing through sound or crying, it is good to you can either say something to everyone, if you don't like this pose, if you're having it challenging, because sometimes sounds can happen because people don't want to do the pose, they're like, oh, and you can hear the person saying, oh. So again, saying, if this is challenging, know that the more you practice, the better this gets. And if it's challenges, just notice the challenge. So writing about what challenging is to you. And so then when you get to your class, you have something to say when you notice that there is a challenge for someone else. Notice about or write about what Warrior 2 means to you, because then when you go to class, you have something to say about Warrior 2, or that you learn from another teacher that you love. And that will help you to be able to talk more if you need to talk more. If you feel like you need to fill the space in order to take people's minds out of the things that are distracting them. You can also talk about distractions. That can be part of the theme. If something is distracting you, notice why it is distracting you. So be prepared to say more things than you are used to saying, or changing poses if you need to change sequences and poses, or you have someone that comes with an injury and you're going to have to direct a lot of the modifications toward that person because of the injury, or you have to change the class for everyone else as well. So having that those sections and categories of poses laying down for you, so you know what twists are, what core exercises are, what standing poses are, what hip openers are, what back bends are, is going to help you to quickly switch in your mind one pose for the other. Now, really quick, let's talk about how to be more comfortable with the improvising. I've mentioned a few things like meditation. The more you practice teaching, the better it gets. And also, I think that over preparing might not be the best thing, because the more you over prepare, the more you get married to that sequence, and the harder it is to change it last minute. So so preparing it, but then on the side in your sequence you can have, okay, these are extra poses I could teach. These are poses that are similar that I could add to it. So prepare in a way that is also flexible. So think of, how can I prepare my sequence in a way that remains flexible, not as a way that I'm going to marry to this sequence for today at 7 p.m. and nothing can change. And if you do like to keep those sequences as close as possible to your written down sequence, what if you change one thing? What if you are like, okay, I have these 10 poses, I'm going to teach them today at 7 p.m., but tonight at 7 p.m., with a few minutes before the class starts, I'm going to change one of them and see what happens. Maybe something I haven't taught much before, and see how it goes. And remember that when you make mistakes, that's not bad. Making mistakes is the process of learning, and it's going to help you to get better in the future. And you can always make a joke out of your mistakes, be like, oh, and by this, I meant that. Or, you know what? I am new at teaching this pose, so let's see what happens. And take a lot of breaths. Don't rush into it. Trust that you know how to teach. Trust your sequence. Trust your program. Trust your learning. And know that if you make a mistake, it's okay, because that is how we learn. And I talk about meditation and how it is a great way to be more sensitive to your surroundings, so you can make last minute changes if you have to. And also putting yourself in your students' shoes is so important. It is so lovely when you are like, okay, this person has smelly feet in front of this other person, so what would I like to happen if I were taking this class? Or this person is moaning next to me, making lots of sounds. If I were teaching this class, what would I like to happen? Or what would I like the instructor to do for me in order to get me out of me thinking about this person making sounds next to me? Or if there is too many people in the class, or if there is this person arriving late, and I'm being affected by everything that's happening around me, what would I like the instructor to say or to do in order to help me in this moment to figure this out? So putting yourself in your student's shoes is very important. Also, going back to the basics is super useful. If you are doing your teacher training, or if you just finished your teacher training, you did a practicum. Practicums, we recommend that you keep them as simple as possible. Don't overcomplicate things. So going back to, what did I used to teach in my first classes, or in my first class? How maybe it doesn't have to be complicated today. Maybe I don't have to thread 5 one-side poses right now in this sequence, and then the other 5 later on the other side. Maybe it's just going to be warrior 1, right and left, warrior 2, right and left, triangle pose, right and left, and make it simple for yourself. That way, then you go back into being centered and connecting to your midline and being grounded and teaching from that place, as opposed to being anxious about it. And another thing that I wanted to say about this is also, what if you teach or go teach and say, I'm going to try to teach that class I taught on Monday, and I'm not going to look at it. I'm just going to try to remember it and see what happens. So, and again, knowing that if I make a mistake, it's okay. I can always go back to the basics. I can always tell the students, hey, I'm trying something new, and that's okay. So not always feeling like you have to memorize things and go teach them, but what if I teach that class on Monday? Do I remember it? And if I don't, could I do it as close as possible and then see what happens? So challenging yourself a little bit to to getting out of your comfort zone. If I think that if one thinks that is not for us, if I think something is not for me, then it is for me. Then I think I should go and do it, because then that's gonna get me out of my comfort zone and is going to, I think, enrich me in different ways. So if you think that you are a kind of a specific person, and therefore you don't do X, Y, and Z, maybe try to go do X, Y, and Z and see what happens. So thank you so much for listening or for watching this later. Ask any comment or ask any questions, put comments down below and I will answer them. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Ciao.